the 7 stages of mind-body healing. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. In my work personally with clients, and in my upcoming course, the Somatic Safety Method, we talk a lot about the 7 stages of mind-body healing. And as we go through this, I want people to be interested and aware of maybe where you're at in your healing. It doesn't mean you're going to be stuck in a certain stage for a long period of time. And also these 7 stages, although in this video I'm going to explain 1 through 7 in a row, it may not be linear because your healing isn't always linear. It's not. You might go stage 1 to 5 all in a row and then jump back to stage 3 and then you're at stage 6. So it can move around a lot. We can backtrack or we can move forward. But it is an interesting idea to understand like what stage of healing you're at, because this is important. We want to make it to stage 7. We may not always be there, but we want to make it there because that's going to help us heal our neuroplastic pain and symptoms. So let's dive in to talking about each of these stages. Stage number 1, confusion, diagnosis seeking, and physical focus. So in chronic pain, chronic fatigue, or other chronic symptoms first develop, what will happen to people is there can be a lot of confusion. We start to interact with the medical system. And again, the medical system can be really helpful and useful. It's just less so, unfortunately, when it comes to chronic pain and symptoms. But what happens to people is they get confused. Maybe your symptoms spread over time, or you keep getting new symptoms. Doctors are having a hard time explaining what's going on. And then people really diagnose seeking. Like there's this diagnosis seeking that starts to take place for people. And I remember doing that. I remember going to specialist after specialist, trying to figure out what's going on. Because I thought if I found the answer, that would fix everything. If they found out what's wrong with me, it could be fixed and I can move on. This is how the medical system works. But unfortunately, with a lot of chronic pain and symptoms, that's not actually effective. And so in this stage 1, there's a lot of physical focus. We're so physically focused. And for a lot of people in this stage, you probably haven't considered a mind-body approach or even maybe watched a video on it or read a blog post because we're so in that medical system. And we're a medicalized society. We have a biological instinct to think that, hurt or physical symptoms means damage. And then our medicalized society just hammers this home, unfortunately. So people could be in stage 1 for decades, just looking for a solution medically, trying to find out what diagnosis they have, what's all the things wrong with their body. So you want to be careful here because we can slip back into this mode. I've seen that happen to people where they've recovered even, and then they get a new symptom, and then they slip back to stage 1. So this is the first stage that we enter. Stage number 2, fear, frustration, avoidance, and despair. After our physical symptoms have developed, we've started to interact with the medical system. Over time, we develop a lot of emotional dysregulation to the physical symptoms. Whether that's fear, frustration, despair, it's a little bit different person to person, but people get caught here. They get so fearful that their body's falling apart, and I remember this. So if you're in that zone, I really do empathize because I remember thinking at 23 years old, my body was fragile and it was just going to get worse month by month. There was so much fear and I was really frustrated with my symptoms at first. And then eventually it went on long enough that I went into like a dorsal vagal state of just completely shutting down and going into despair, hopelessness, helplessness. And, I call this the sensitization cycle. It's kind of like the pain fear cycle, but I include the states of the nervous system: fight, flight, freeze, shutdown, where it just perpetuates things. So stage 2, I've seen people hang out here a really long time too, where they just get so lost in their emotional response, their nervous system's response to the physical symptoms, that it just escalates things over time. So that's stage number 2. And it's really easy to slip back here, especially if we have a pain or symptom flare. People can fall back into stage 2 really quickly, but we just want to make sure we don't spend too much time here. And that's partly why I've made this channel, to give you accurate, useful educational skills and strategies to help us break this emotional response that's taking place. Stage number 3, opening up to a new explanation. This is a good stage to be in. If this is the first video you've ever watched of mine, you may be here, where you're just starting to open up to the idea that maybe, just maybe, your pain or physical symptoms are not due to damage or disease in the body. Maybe, just maybe, they are due to your brain and nervous system being stuck in a state of survival. And as we know, with a lot of chronic pain and symptoms, this is the cause. But starting to open up, this takes a lot of time to get here for some people. I've seen people get here really quickly, within 3 months of having chronic symptoms, they're already starting to open up to this approach. For myself, it took several years. I was not open to this a year or 2 into having chronic pain and symptoms, but there were little steps along the way. I remember a psychiatrist sat me down and told me, the amount of anxiety, depression, dysregulation I had, there was just no way that wasn't affecting my chronic pain and symptoms. And I was kind of upset. I took it as, she's calling my pain fake. But as we know, all pain is real, whether it's due to damage or disease in the body, or whether it's due to your brain and nervous system. It's felt the same, it's experienced the same, it's all real. So I want to hit that home as well. But that experience with a psychiatrist, it just slowly opened me up to it. I wasn't ready to jump in, but I was starting to open up. I had another physio tell me that really there was nothing wrong with my body. This was probably due to anxiety. And so there was a few experiences that slowly started to open me up to this. Now, eventually I came across some YouTube videos about Dr. Sarno. Many, many years ago, there wasn't really many videos out there, hence why I've made this channel. And I read the first chapter of Sarno's book. This was kind of, this stage 3 for me, where I was just starting to open up to it. And after I read the first chapter of his book, I put it down for a couple of months. But I was mulling it over. It takes time. It took me a little bit of time. And I started to increase that belief little bit by little bit. But maybe you're in stage 3 and you're here and you're just exploring your options, and that's great. Check out lots of my videos. I hope that you find something that can be healing for you here. Stage number 4, gathering education and evidence. So after stage 3, where we've opened up, eventually at stage 4, people dive into the education. This is a great stage to be in. I love this stage. People dive in and they really start to consume the material that's out there. Maybe watching my videos, maybe reading The Way Out by Alan Gordon, reading some of the Dr. Sarno books, or reading Dr. Schubiner's book. But they really start to consume the education, because it takes a lot for us to start to believe that this isn't a physical issue, that our pain and symptoms aren't due to some physical issue in our body. It takes a lot. That's not an inherent thing that we believe as human beings. And our culture and society, we kind of have to go against it. To get there, we're going against the medical system in a lot of ways to get to this place. So that education is really key. I'm careful here because, if you're consuming 5 hours of education and you're 5 months into this, and you're consuming 5 hours of education a day, that's too much. You're doing too much. That I can promise you. But at first, we really need to learn about this. When I read Dr. Schubiner's book, I made so many connections. My brain was just lighting up with connections where I understood that what was happening. Now, the second is we start to gather evidence that our pain or symptoms are neuroplastic in nature. So there's a set of criteria that I go off of, linking to Alan Gordon's work and Dr. Schubiner's work. Now, I've done a video on these criteria. I'll link it to the top and I'll put it in the description of this video. And so you can check that out, go through it, start to gather some evidence, because that's the starting place. We need to start to increase the belief that, hey, our symptoms are neuroplastic and this is what's taking place. And write it down. I always tell people, don't just think about the evidence, write it down. You know, one of the biggest pieces of evidence that I had early on, when I was definitely within this stage of education and evidence gathering, is I was lying down in the floor of my office at the university, because in between having sessions, my back would hurt so much. So my back was really painful. And I lied down, I really started to do some hope meditation, some visualization, brain retraining. And I was visualizing my future being symptom-free. And I really got into it. I felt this hopeful, warm feeling inside. And all of a sudden, my back pain went from an 8 down to like a 1 or a 2. And that was a huge piece of evidence, because I knew at that point there was nothing wrong with my back and hips. There's no way that things that would be that effective if there was something physically going on. And so as a result of that, that was a huge piece of evidence. But I want people to gather their own evidence, write some of it down. Be curious this week as you progress. Notice what your pain or symptoms are doing. Number 5, developing new hope and belief that you can heal from this. Stage 5, it's a great stage. I remember feeling, when I think back on this time period for myself, a lot of nostalgic, warm, fuzzy feelings inside. So in the last stage, when we were gathering evidence, we're increasing the belief that the symptoms are neuroplastic. And that's the first belief you need. But in this stage now, what we're doing is we're increasing the belief that there's hope that we can actually heal. We gotta learn and understand and develop hope that we can heal from this. And you're just cultivating it first. Success stories are great. You know, if you've benefited from my videos and you've benefited from a mind-body approach, truly, I invite you, no pressure, but I invite you in the comment to share a healing win that you've had, because we can heal together. These success stories, whether they're on Curable, TMS Wiki, that's the site that was up when I was healing, I'd read these success stories, and that helped me develop hope that I could heal from widespread chronic pain and symptoms. It really did. And so part of why I share my personal story is to give you all hope. But there's lots of healing stories out there. There's lots of success stories. So really start to consume some of that to start to cultivate that hope inside. Hope can be healing. It's not the full solution, but it can be very healing. So that's important, but it's also collecting healing wins. Now, when we talk about healing wins, sometimes people think that that needs to mean that their pain went down 50% or something of this nature. It always has to do with pain or symptoms, but there's lots of healing wins. A healing win could be that you could walk a little bit more and your pain didn't skyrocket. A healing win could be that you started to approach emotions, or you felt a little bit more regulated this week. These are all healing wins. Give yourself a healing high five. That's what I talk about. I know that's cheesy. But truly, we need to collect those healing wins because they help us understand we're progressing, even if our symptoms haven't shifted much yet. Symptoms are often the last thing to shift. We have all these other healing wins going on. So if you're comfortable, share a healing win down below. Let's heal together as a community. But in this stage, we really want to cultivate that hope that healing is possible. And I'm here to tell you, if your symptoms are neuroplastic, it is possible. Number 6, engaging in healing practices. This is where the meat and potatoes of the healing is. So we've moved swiftly through stage 1 to 5, and now we're on, I lost my count, we're on number 6 here, engaging in healing practices. We really need to start to engage in it. Not too intensely and not with a bunch of pressure to make our symptoms go away, but there's lots of great healing practices. You know, in the Somatic Safety Method, when I'm using with clients, but also in our upcoming course, we talk about thinking and belief system We do a lot of healing practices around that. We talk about brain retraining, graded exposure. Brain retraining involves changing our emotional response, our nervous system response to the physical symptoms. But graded exposure, starting to widen your world. You got to approach to heal, people. We need to approach. If you stay in avoidance, you will not heal. So we need to approach slowly but gradually. And so graded exposure helps us do that. I was barely walking by the end. Truly, I could walk maybe 5 minutes. I was not really able to move my arms much. So I had to do a lot of graded exposure brain retraining to increase that. Emotional practices, I've got a number of them on the channel that you can check out. I'll link an anxiety one to the top here that you can check out. I'll put it in the description of the video too. But emotional work is really key in some of this. And I have a step-by-step guide, which I'll put the links above and below as well. A step-by-step guide for processing emotions somatically and learning to release them. It's everything you need to know. So it's a long video, but it's well worth your time. And then nervous system regulation. I have a great video on 7 steps to regulating your nervous system. This is key. Regulating the nervous system, processing trauma, it often needs to happen to have full recovery. Again, I'll put the links above and below so you have that as well. So, lots of healing practices on this channel that I'm giving you for free. So utilize them, people, please. They're very essential for your practice and for your healing to progress. And finally, stage number 7, neuroplastic pain and symptoms become self-evident. So in stage number 7, usually this happens later on in healing. You're not going to force your way to stage number 7. I've had lots of people trying to force their belief, so they need to fully believe it's neuroplastic or TMS to heal. You don't at first. I don't think I believed my symptoms were fully neuroplastic until I was 80-90% out of pain. It was just not possible at the beginning. I became more and more open as I gathered evidence and cultivated hope. But in stage number 7, by the time I was almost fully healed, there was so much evidence. It was self-evident at that point that my symptoms were neuroplastic. You couldn't have convinced me otherwise. Now, I'm still backpedaled a few moments. There was a few rough moments where I backpedaled to, past stages. But in stage number 7, that belief becomes really solid because we have so much evidence. Nothing had worked for me for almost 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. But engaging in this work for 3-4 months, I saw a huge shift in my symptoms. And so as a result, it became self-evident, and I became very solid in my understanding that this was neuroplastic and that I was going to heal. So stage number 7 is a great place to be, but don't force yourself to get there. It takes time to get there, and everyone's path is different. So these are the 7 stages to mind-body healing that we created as a bit of a guide. I think it could be really useful for people. Again, don't be critical of where you're at. Even if you've been at this for many years, that's okay. Every one of us is on a different healing journey. We're all on a different healing adventure. It's going to take time, and we need to be patient and kind to ourselves as we are engaging in this work. So spend some time, notice what stage you're in currently, and maybe make a bit of a plan of how you can keep progressing through the stages and moving forward. So please put your questions or comments down below, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you all later. Take care.